My name is Jonathan Cave, and I'm a member of the advisory board of CCRC, and I am by training an economist and a game theorist. I think that all useful definitions of civilization should think of civilization not as a state that we're in or as a destination to which we aspire, but as a process of development. So civilization is like integration or any other process. The thing that makes it cyber, civilizations generally involve people working together in different ways, some of them explicit and others implicit, let's say cultural. And from participation in the civilization, they get the advantages of interacting with other people, which mean being able to enjoy and participate in things they wouldn't have thought up for themselves, gaining certain benefits in terms of security. When they're children growing up, they get to discover what they're best at and what fulfills them to do, instead of simply doing what needs to be done. So it offers the advantages of society, but with this extra element that there is a development that can help them to identify the values that are important to them. And the thing that makes it cyber is that the technologies of communication on the one hand and the collection and processing of data and information on the other hand can change the nature of their interactions. They can interact with more people more quickly about many more things. That's not necessarily good, but it's certainly one cyber characteristic. The other thing, however, which I think is more dubious, is that the cyber form of interaction with other people interposes something between me as a person and you as a person. And because I know it's taking place over a cyber network, and particularly because now I can no longer tell whether I'm interacting with a person or with a computer program, and even if it is a person, I don't know whether the person knows that they're interacting with me or that they may have been informed by information that was given to them either for bad purposes or for no purpose at all. It reduces that instinctive level of trust that it can reduce it, that allows me to see something of myself in you. And that sympathy, that shared identity, is part of the thing that allows us to become civilized. In other words, to do good things for no other reason than that they are good things. Not because I get a reward for doing it or I'm punished for not doing it. So that's another aspect of civilization, which is that we are civil. Well, I grew up in a small town. I knew a lot of people in that town. It was kind of a broadband connection. I knew people who were scientists and factory workers and school friends and people I didn't get along with, people of my religion, no religion, or religions that thought that my religion was terrible. Because I could see these people and they could see me in many contexts, I would come to some understanding of this person as, let's say, somebody who worked, and somebody who ate in restaurants, and somebody who cheered for certain teams. But I knew that it was all the same person. When I interact with people online, it tends to be a much more narrow band connection. I interact with people in a particular context for a particular purpose. So if, for example, in my development as a young person, growing up, or even now as a not-so-young person, changing my views, I begin to move in ways that are perhaps undesirable, perhaps not even consonant with my own interests. When I was growing up in this small town, if I was doing this thing that teenagers do of becoming a separate person, not my parents anymore, and so on, and I went too far, the town was ever ready to remind me. And there was a kind of continuity. It was expected that I would grow up and join that society. Online, that doesn't happen. You can seek out people who share your interests, and you will encourage each other. And you may be aware that if you go too far in this direction, bad things will happen, but you have your group of people and you can point to the others and say, we're not like them. But it's like a clump of leaves drifting down a stream. The other clump is always ahead of you, and you don't notice the bank of the stream passing by. So there's a certain sense in which the mutually sustaining effect of social interaction can be obscured by that. One other thing is that the cybernetic nature of things brings a kind of credibility. It's like scientism, right? This is numbers, it's computers, it's objective, it's valid, it's verifiable, therefore I can believe it, even if it is nonsense or noise or a deafening echo. And so therefore, the filtration that says this is sensible, this is not sensible, may change. And as a result of that, my affect, my sense that I should care about you as a person, can be attenuated to some extent. On the other hand, I can meet a lot more people than I ever could in my little hometown. I can have conversations about things, and what's perhaps even more important as I get older, I don't have to have conversations once they've gone past the point where they're worth having. And there was a famous study by Marcel Fauchon at Oxford who looked at people's happiness in Nepal, in Kathmandu, and in the small villages. And he found, contrary to expectations, that people were happier in Kathmandu than they were in the village. Why? Because there were people in the village with whom they could not get along, but whom they could not escape, and on whom they had to depend, because it was a small village. In Kathmandu, you could choose whom you wanted to associate with, and you could choose people who were sympathetic to associate with. And although you shared the city and its functions with those people, you could, by self-association, create a nice social cluster for yourself. And cyber possibilities, particularly if we have control of who connects to us and why, allow us some of that metropolitan thing. So if you read, let's say, Jane Jacobs on the life of cities, that view of cities as self-organizing spaces of shared public and private information, that to me is what my experience of the cyber world is. The biggest challenge that I see as a result of forming and participating in cyber civilizations is that we become either less human or differently human. Because human beings do a lot of things. You know, they do physical things, they make computations, they exchange information, they collect it and think about it and talk about it. And we automate more and more and more of those things. Now, presumably, there's something left inside. And if we push this far enough, whatever's left of us, if anything, will be a workable definition of humanity as distinct from machines. But most of the things that sustain us, that give our lives meaning and so on, are these things that could be automated. So we were talking earlier today about employment and what algorithms and the automation of jobs will do to employment. And one part of it is the tasks that employees do. They are engaged in an exchange, and the original conception was you gave up your time, a chunk of your life, to do something that would benefit your employer, and in exchange you got money, which you could then use to buy things to enjoy what was left of your life. Now, at the end of your life, you tended to leave not very much behind except some used commodities. But employment is much more than that. It defines your sense of identity, what's right and wrong, your position in society, your ability to interact with people socially, politically, culturally, and ethically, because that's where we all spend our time. So if we are cast out of our jobs, one of the challenges is, can we use the time and the headspace that's freed up to do things that we couldn't do as jobs, but in fact to do things that might create value, even if we can't put money on that value? On the other hand, we could simply become entities that have to be served by machines, and we don't gain through having to do anything for ourselves. We just sit there and wait to be served, like the Eloy and the H.G. Wells War time machine. So that, I think, is the biggest challenge, that in designing something that automates the trivial, boring, worrisome, dangerous, painful parts of humanity, we become, in a sense, less human. And one final thing I'll say about it, if you think about the things that human beings create that we think are of lasting aesthetic value, things like poetry and opera and music and art, how much of that has come from our pain as human beings? Not necessarily from our joy, from the possibility of joy coming out of pain. And if we remove that pain, or the possibility of changing our condition, then what will we have left to express? Will just be a package of appetites that are being fed.